How should we eat properly? What can we eat? What should we eat to be healthy? What should we eat to avoid getting sick? What do we need to eat to cure certain diseases that exist in our bodies? These are the questions we will look at now. I will tell you what proper nutrition should be for a person, but these are not just some fantasies or people's speculations. We will look at how our body is structured, specifically the digestive system. We will examine how it functions and what physiologically proper nutrition for a person should be. So, as always, let's start with the structure. The human digestive system does exactly what its name suggests. Food is digestion, but food is usually cooked in a pot when it reaches a boiling temperature of 100 degrees, whereas in our body there is no temperature of 100 degrees, no boiling. In our body, food is cooked, meaning it is broken down into its component parts by processing it with substances called enzymes. Enzymes are alkalis and acids that are produced in the digestive system. They process food by breaking it down into its component parts. So our digestive system consists of the following parts. Initially, the food that enters our mouth undergoes mechanical processing, there chewing with the teeth, mixing with the tongue, and moistening with the product of the salivary glands, saliva. And when the food is mixed and becomes a sufficiently soft, moist lump, a person swallows this food through the pharynx. Pay attention to the words, everything will match up. When food is swallowed, it travels down the esophagus, is carried into the stomach, and upon entering the stomach, it reaches the first important organ of the gastrointestinal tract. This is the stomach. The stomach is a sac into which all the food we eat initially enters. It is located under the left rib in a person. The stomach contains two things: acid, strong hydrochloric acid, which is necessary to disinfect the food we eat. In addition, our stomach already contains the first enzymes for digesting food. This is the enzyme pepsin, which breaks down the protein component of our food. Let's make a small remark and take a closer look at the food we eat. If we break down the food we eat into its components, our food consists of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, as well as fiber, which is not digested in our body but passes through the entire digestive tract and is excreted with the stool. But proteins are digested and broken down into amino acids. They're building blocks. Fats are digested and broken down into fatty acids. And various carbohydrates are also digested primarily into glucose, as well as other sugars like fructose, mannose, maltose, and other carbohydrates. And then later on, only the nutrients themselves are absorbed into the bloodstream. These components are the products of breakdown in the digestive system. So the very first stage of protein digestion actually begins in the stomach. What are proteins? Well, proteins are meat, fish, milk, eggs. That is, if we're talking about animal sources, or proteins can be of plant origin, such as legumes, beans, peas, or nuts, as well as many other foods that also contain proteins. And proteins take quite a long time to digest, anywhere from 30 minutes to 5 hours, depending on the specific product and type of food. And in the stomach, these proteins are digested by the enzyme pepsin. By the way, the acidity in the stomach is maintained by the presence of hydrochloric acid. However, the food that enters the stomach neutralizes this acidity, reducing it. As a result of this decrease in acidity, a kind of lock called the pylorus opens. It's the gateway between the stomach and the next section of our digestive system, the duodenum. In other words, when the food has sufficiently neutralized the stomach acid, the pylorus opens and the food begins to enter the duodenum. The most important organ of the digestive system is the intestine, about 12 finger widths long, which is where it gets its name from. It forms a horseshoe shape in our abdomen, and within this horseshoe holds the head of the pancreas, whose ducts open into the duodenum. The duodenum also accommodates and receives ducts from the liver, through which bile is released. Let's talk about these glands now. So the liver. The liver performs many functions, but one of its main functions is the production of bile. Bile is a special caustic alkaline substance whose purpose is to participate in the digestion of fats. In other words, bile digests fat, fat bile, BB. That's an easy way to remember it. And bile is needed to digest fat, and this digestion begins in the duodenum. From the liver, bile flows through ducts into a single bile duct and is released into the duodenum. However, before bile enters there, there's also a storage sac, the gallbladder, which is located behind the liver. Its purpose is to ensure that bile from the liver is released into the intestine, not continuously, but in portions. So between each portion, bile accumulates in the gallbladder. The pancreas, as the name suggests, is located beneath the stomach. And when it comes to the pancreas, which is located under the stomach, in a person lying down, in a standing person in a vertical position, it is not under, but behind the stomach, so it could be called the behind the stomach gland. The behind the stomach gland, or pancreas, is the factory for all the enzymes in our body. It produces enzymes for breaking down carbohydrates, such as amylase. It produces enzymes for breaking down fats, such as lipase. It produces enzymes for breaking down proteins, trypsin and chymotrypsin. In other words, it digests all types of food. And this all happens right there in the duodenum, where the pancreatic duct opens. The pancreas produces enzymes, releases them into the duodenum, and there the food begins the process of digestion and breakdown under the action of these enzymes. After this, following the duodenum, comes the small intestine. The loops of the small intestine are several meters long. Yes, even though a person is not very large, the loops of the small intestine are packed inside the abdomen, and food passes through the human small intestine, where three processes take place. First, all the food that has been processed by enzymasis, broken down into its components by these enzymes. In the small intestine, there are villi that perform the second function, which is absorption. Through the villi, nutrients and the products of food breakdown are absorbed from the small intestine into the bloodstream. And the food that has not been broken down, the food that is not needed fiber, this is the third process. From the small intestine, it passes into the large intestine, is expelled through the Bowhin's canal, the Bowhin's valve, and from the small intestine enters the large intestine. Friends, there is no food left in the large intestine. There, what was food changes its name from food, it becomes feces. This is already excrement, it is no longer needed by the body of anything. Useful has already been absorbed in the small intestine. But in this food, in the feces, there is still a lot of liquid. And this liquid, in order to maintain a normal water balance in the body and prevent dehydration, must be absorbed in the large intestine. In the right iliac region, the transition of food stool from the small intestine to the large intestine takes place. Next comes the cecal section of the intestine, the so-called cecum. After that is the colon. The colon consists of the ascending, transverse, and descending sections. Next, the intestine is located closest to the surface. First, in the abdomen, if you go from the outside in, the first thing you'll encounter is the large intestine, and it's slightly bigger in size. It contains pouch-like structures called hostra, and is where the process of peristalsis occurs. That is, the contraction of the intestine gradually and sequentially moves the mush, the stool, along the intestine, and during this process, fluid is absorbed from it, water is absorbed. But then, look, the intestine is located superficially, while the exit is at the back. And that's why on the left, in the left iliac region, the intestine forms a loop shaped like the Greek letter sigma, which is why it's called the sigmoid colon. And then after the sigmoid colon, there is an ampulla kind of widening, then the rectum, and finally the anus, the exit through which excrement, the residual products of digestion, leave the body. This comprehensive overview delves into the intricate structure and the vital functioning of our human digestive system. Understanding this complex structure and its efficient functioning is absolutely crucial, as these fundamental aspects directly determine what constitutes truly proper and optimal nutrition for an individual. Now, let us proceed to thoroughly discuss the multifaceted topic of nutrition in a manner that is not only proper and accurate, but also exceptionally clear, easily understandable, and logically coherent for you to grasp fully. Let's start figuring it out. So the digestive system works constantly. It operates without stopping. It can work faster or slower, but it is always functioning. The glands that produce enzymes work continuously, but sometimes their product, as in the case of the liver and gallbladder, is collected in the gallbladder. It's profoundly important to thoroughly understand that because the human digestive system operates continuously and without cessation, our nutritional intake must also be consistently and uninterruptedly provided in a steady flow. This continuous and unwavering supply of essential nutrients is absolutely crucial in order to fully ensure the optimal and efficient use of all the vital enzymes meticulously produced within our intricate and complex bodily systems. But even though we eat constantly and we do eat all the time, there is still one long pause in our daily life when we don't eat. And that pause is nighttime. And usually this pause lasts about 12 hours. So, for example, if I have dinner at 7 and breakfast at 7, then during this 12-hour period at night, I don't eat anything. It's a mistake to think that the digestive system doesn't work at night. It continues to work at night as well. It just works a little differently, at a slightly different pace and intensity, but it still functions. That is, at night the pancreas keeps working and the liver keeps working too. At night the liver continues to produce bile, collecting it in the gallbladder. And in the morning when a person wakes up, their enzyme systems are fully replenished. There are a lot of enzymes that have accumulated in order to do their job, to carry out digestion. And in the morning, these enzyme systems need to be emptied. Since a lot of enzymes have built up over the whole night, over 12 hours, in order to empty all the enzyme systems and use up all the enzymes, breakfast absolutely must be very substantial. And the word substantial refers not to the amount of food eaten, but to the percentage of the daily intake. That is, if this is how much a person eats in a day, then 60% of the daily intake should be eaten in the morning. Following the principle, eat breakfast yourself. A person should eat a lot for breakfast, twice as much as for lunch. Share your lunch with a friend. After all, in 5 hours before lunch, not that many enzymes accumulate. And dinner should be half the size of lunch. That is, it should be very small, really minimal. Eat breakfast yourself. Share your lunch with a friend half as much, 30% of the daily intake, and then only 10% is left for dinner. And this is the correct way to distribute food throughout the day. It is physiologically correct in accordance with how our gastrointestinal tract and digestive system are structured and function. This is how nutrition should be: a big breakfast, a small lunch, and almost nothing for dinner. However, in most people, the opposite pattern is observed. Skipping breakfast, what is often called the foolishness of intermittent fasting. Then they eat a little at lunch and gorge themselves in the evening. And in this case, it is the enemy who taught people to take pleasure in eating a lot at dinner. Yes, it is enjoyable. Yes, it flatters just a little a person's ego. They don't want to eat in the morning. They're on a diet. They feel like a hero. But in the evening, when their willpower runs out, they stuff themselves and eat a lot. But this harms the digestive system. That's why breakfast should be large, lunch should be smaller half, the size, and dinner should be even smaller. Moreover, breakfast should be fatty, because overnight, a whole bladder of bile accumulates. And in the morning, the bile needs to be emptied, the gallbladder needs to be emptied, the bile needs to be used. Bile is used to digest fatty foods. So it should be something fatty. The fats can be of plant origin, dairy, or animal. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that it shouldn't be dry, lean, or fat-free food. Otherwise, the bile won't be used. And then the accumulation of bile in the gallbladder will lead to the formation of gallstones and inflammation, chronic cholecystitis. That's why breakfast must be big and fatty. But how come they say you shouldn't eat fatty foods? You shouldn't eat them after 9 in the morning. But early in the morning, as early as possible, you must have fatty food to use up the bile that has accumulated in the gallbladder throughout the night. That's why breakfast should be big, hearty, fatty, and most importantly, as early as possible, but no later than 7 in the morning. Let me explain how this works. The thing is, it all depends on the biological timing of peak activity for our internal organs. For example, the time when our stomach is most active is from 7 to 9 in the morning. From 7 to 9 in the morning, acid and enzymes are already being produced in the stomach. From 7 to 9 in the morning, they will be digesting. But here you have two options. Either they will digest and consume themselves, that is, digest the stomach itself, or they will digest your breakfast, but they are always at work. Enzymes and pepsin are always active at 7 in the morning. And if there is still no breakfast at this time, they begin to damage the stomach lining, gastritis, gastroduodenitis, and peptic ulcers of the stomach and duodenum. Therefore, in order for the enzymes to digest food instead of the stomach itself, breakfast should be as early as possible at 7 in the morning. At 7 or by 7:30 at the latest. But that's not the main point. The main thing is the pancreas. Its period of activity is from 9 to 11 o'clock. And already by 9 in the morning, there are enzymes present that will digest the food eaten an hour and a half earlier. And if an hour and a half earlier, at 7:30, there was still no breakfast, then the enzymes have nothing to digest. And in that case, the pancreatic enzymes start digesting the pancreas itself, autolysis, or self-digestion of the pancreas. A pancreas that is being destroyed becomes overgrown with connective tissue. And when it becomes overgrown with connective tissue, on an ultrasound, it appears dense, it seems rigid, and they say the pancreas is of increased echogenicity, chronic pancreatitis. And the reason for this is that the person has breakfast late. By the way, when the pancreas digests itself, this eventually leads to the destruction of its endocrine part as well, which results in what is known as type 2 diabetes. And this means that having a late breakfast is also a cause of type 2 diabetes. And this is a problem. Breakfast should be as early as possible, but no later than 7 or 7:30 in the morning. Breakfast should be big, fatty, hearty, and then your digestive system will function properly and efficiently. I never tell people what to eat or how much to eat. That is not within my rights. Maybe a person can't afford the food they need. I can't know that. That's why I always teach this. Keep eating what you ate yesterday and the day before, but eat it at a different time. And that is something that definitely depends on you. So keep your diet the same in terms of quantity and quality. Only the timing of your meals changes. And this, my friends, is the first factor of proper nutrition. The second factor is this. You need to ensure maximum rest immediately after eating. So right after the person eats, they need to take what I'm holding in my hands is a product made from turmanium ceramic. Just don't confuse it. This is not a tourmaline mat. Those are completely different things. This is turmanium ceramic. Well, some people have trouble telling genes apart from Gina the crocodile, or they mix up hemorrhoids with sinusitis and end up putting an enema in their nose. But words and terms in medicine are very important. You can't confuse potassium chloride and thiazolium chloride and potassium cyanide, because changing just two words can cause serious health problems for a person. I'm talking about turmanium ceramic, and for proper digestion, this is the second essential component. You need to take a product made of turmanium ceramic, heat it to a temperature of 50 to 55 degrees. This is set on the remote control and placing it on the right hypochondrium. Warm your abdomen for 20 to 30 minutes each time after eating. After eating means after breakfast, after lunch, and as for dinner, we keep it minimal. Warm your abdomen every time after eating. When you warm your abdomen, the infrared heat from the turmanium ceramic penetrates as deeply as possible and helps relax any spasmed muscle fibers in the bile ducts, if there are any. As a result, the bile ducts expand and bile flows freely into your intestines. By the way, this means you should only warm your abdomen after eating, and you shouldn't do it on an empty stomach, because otherwise the bile will start to flow, but there will be nothing to digest, and it will return to the stomach and could make you nauseous. So you need to warm your abdomen after eating. This frees up the bile ducts. The second thing is, when you warm your bile, the abdomen improved blood circulation causes the blood vessels to dilate and more blood flows in. As a result, wounds and injuries that occur in the digestive system heal. In cases of fatty liver disease, the structure of the liver is restored. With peptic ulcers of the stomach and duodenum, ulcer damage heals, and injuries from pancreatitis heal as well, especially when connective tissue starts to grow in. And in addition, thirdly, this kind of warming also increases blood circulation and improves the function of the glands. That is, the liver starts producing thinner bile so that there is no stagnation and it flows out more easily. The pancreas produces better enzymes for digesting food. And as a result, there is no need to take things like mesim, festal, and other substances or artificial enzymes the pancreas can produce enough on its own. By the way, in diabetes, the pancreas will also improve insulin production. That's why warming the abdomen after meals with the infrared heat of turmanium ceramics is the second essential component for maintaining the health of the digestive system. So, to sum up, if you want your digestion to work well, you need two things: proper nutrition and warming your abdomen. Proper nutrition means having a big breakfast, a small lunch, and almost nothing for dinner. Breakfast should be fatty and as early as possible, but no later than 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And warming your abdomen with the infrared heat of turmanium ceramics for 20 to 30 minutes after each meal ensures good digestion. And then your digestive system will be healthy. That's it.